Have you ever been abandoned by the people you love? On your special day? Here's my story of how I was stranded in a random tiny village in Germany, all alone, with no phone, no money, and no idea how to communicate in German. All because my bridesmaids and fiancé thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in a small village in Germany. As a prank. Welcome to my nightmare turned life lesson. So it all started when my bridal group planned a surprise bachelorette vacation to Europe. Sounds like a dream bachelorette, right? They ensured to keep everything a secret and just told me to dress for chilly weather, carry walking shoes, and be prepared for an adventure. Going to Germany has always been on my to-do list, and I am finally able to tick it off, I said to myself as I packed my stuff in a small bag. It wasn't just about checking something off a bucket list. It felt like the beginning of something big. I imagined Instagram-worthy moments, bonding time, and heartfelt late-night talks. I had watched so many brides go on these magical getaways with their closest friends. It was supposed to be the kind of trip you tell your kids about one day, right? I remember the night before we flew out. I couldn't sleep. My excitement was buzzing just beneath the surface of my skin. I sat on the floor next to my suitcase, triple-checking my passport and headphones, giggling at the fact that I didn't even know where we were going. I trusted them that much. We flew into Munich, absolutely buzzing with excitement. The moment we walked out of the airport, it felt like we had stepped into a watercolor painting. Snow-dusted rooftops, cobblestone alleys, fresh mountain air laced with the scent of pretzels and roasted chestnuts. There's a certain magic to Bavaria in late autumn, something that makes every breath feel crisp and new. We rented a spacious van so that we could explore southern Germany. We had so much fun in the van, singing our favorite songs, snacking, and admiring the natural beauty of Germany. There was a soundtrack to that van ride, a perfect mix of throwback hits and cheesy road trip songs. Whitney Houston's I Wanna Dance with Somebody blasted while we all belted it out off-key. At one point, someone made up a ridiculous road trip dance, and we all mimicked it every time we hit a new town. I remember how my best friend Kira leaned over during one drive and whispered, "This is it, you know? These are the days we'll talk about when we're old." I smiled, feeling warm, feeling loved, feeling chosen. But soon, things were about to change. My bridesmaids and fiancé had different plans for me. We took a fantasy tour, visiting castles straight out of a Disney movie, towns with gingerbread-style cottages, and beer gardens nestled under ancient chestnut trees. Every turn felt like entering into a fairy tale. I was literally smiling ear to ear, trying to enjoy the vibe. But then things took a turn, and something happened. Someone from the group thought it would be hilarious to pull a prank on me. You know, some light-hearted humor and fun before the wedding. Except, they just left me. We made a stop in this small mountain settlement. It was gorgeous. Like Hallmark movie-level gorgeous. Wooden signs hanging from hand-forged iron brackets, little cobbled paths, with horse-drawn carts rolling by. A stream trickled past the road, and an elderly man was playing the accordion by the bridge. It felt like time had paused. My friends told me we were simply getting refreshments and would be right back after using the restroom. I was more than happy to say, okay, as I wanted a little me time in this extremely pretty place. I remember thinking, this is the kind of village where people fall in love. It was the kind of place you imagined running away to after a hard breakup. Slow-paced, peaceful, full of charm. I sat on a bench for a few minutes, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind rustle through the trees. But I didn't know that this little me time would soon become the most miserable time of my life. I entered this beautiful little bakery, which was right in front of a small stream. The ambiance of the bakery was so warm and cozy. It was a tiny bakery decorated with lots of warm lamps and green pots. The smell of cinnamon and fresh bread wrapped around me like a hug. A plump older woman behind the counter smiled at me warmly as I ordered a coffee and a pastry, nodding even though I had no idea if she understood me. Just when I turned around to see if my friends were back, I saw there was no van. I ran outside to see where the van was parked, but to my surprise, there were no signs of the van. I was confused, nervous, and scared. Why would they leave me here like that? I thought to myself. Is it all part of the surprise as well? Are they planning to just pop up with more surprises? What could be the reason to just leave me behind? So many questions were coming to my mind. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of a joke. But then 5 minutes passed. Then 15. I took out my mobile and tried to reach each one of them. But it looks like I was in bad luck. No service. I walked back into the bakery. The nice old lady behind the counter spoke no English, and my German was limited to Bratwurst and Danke. I tried to act casual, sipping tea slowly while my heartbeat echoed in my ears. The window fogged up with my breath as I watched every passing car, hoping to see the van. Nothing. I was literally shivering at this point. What is happening? I wondered. So here I was, standing in the middle of an unknown village. There were no phone signals, no Wi-Fi. I'm not sure if this was a joke or if I was just forgotten. I tried to remain cool. Perhaps they were around the bend. Perhaps it was just a joke. But when I checked the clock, 45 minutes had passed. That's when I started panicking, super nervous. You know the rapid rush of adrenaline you get when your brain goes into overdrive? Is that fight or flight mode? Yes, that's it. I was overthinking and overanalyzing. I began to wonder what would happen if they got into an accident. What if they assumed I was in the van? What if they really didn't notice I wasn't there? Worse, what if this was not a mistake? Everything was closed. There were no tourists, no taxis, just myself, a suitcase, and this strange, unreal silence. I asked a woman watering plants whether she spoke English. She simply smiled pleasantly and shrugged. That's when I noticed an older man strolling his dog. I took a chance. He didn't speak English either, but he was kind. He could see I was so nervous and understood that I was lost, and led me, slowly, to the rat house, the town hall. I took a sigh of relief as I saw a few tourists there and a landline. They had a landline, like an actual corded phone. I dialed my fiancé's number with shaky fingers. He picked up on the first ring, and he was laughing. I couldn't believe it. "Hi, James," I stuttered, but he continued to laugh. I was so nervous at this point. "Why are you laughing?" I said on the phone. "Because you looked so confused on the CCTV, he remarked. I froze right at that moment. "You guys have been watching me on CCTV? You thought it was funny to leave me here?" Yes. CCTV. They'd been watching me, using the bakery's security camera across the street. The whole bunch, including my fiancé and bridesmaids, swarmed around their phones, giggling like it was the funniest thing ever. I stood in that tiny town hall lobby, my hand clenched so tightly around the phone that I could hear the plastic creaking. This wasn't a prank, it was humiliation, streamed for their entertainment. I was so disappointed and shattered. It wasn't funny to me. "We'll be back soon," he said. There were no apologies, no concern. Just, "We'll be back shortly," as if they had abandoned me at a Starbucks, not a distant alpine village. When they eventually arrived, about an hour and a half later, they were all giggling like kids who had just toilet papering a house. My fiancé hopped out of the van and said, "Gotcha!" I did not laugh. Not even a little. I felt chilly, nervous, and ashamed. The bakery employees were whispering. It was getting dark and cold. I was supposed to be enjoying my bachelorette party, and here I was, feeling miserable. I told them straight out, "Well, if it's a joke, jokes are supposed to be funny. They're not supposed to hurt you. You wouldn't leave someone alone in a distant place." But here is the worst part. They still didn't fully get it. They brushed my feelings aside. One of my friends, Amelia, said, "You're okay. Nothing awful occurred. Stop being so sensitive. It was all part of the plan." There was an awkward silence after that. And in that silence, something shifted inside me. It was like I had been shaken awake. That night, I remained silent. I did not go to supper with them. I stayed at the Airbnb and contacted my sister back home, weeping. She was furious. "They left you alone? In another country?" she asked, her voice rising. I don't care if it was for 10 minutes or 10 hours. That's not a joke. That's emotional cruelty. And she was right. It wasn't simply about getting left behind. It was a betrayal. The fact that those closest to me, my future husband and my best friends, believed it was okay to terrify me like that. For laughs. It wasn't just the isolation, it was the watching. The fact that they could see me unraveling and still didn't step in. That they found it entertaining. Like I was a character on a prank show. But I wasn't a paid actor. I was a real person who genuinely thought something might be wrong, who was shaking and terrified in a country she didn't know, surrounded by people who didn't speak her language. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole scene. I began to question everything. If this was their idea of love and friendship, did I really know these people at all? Growing up, I always felt like a joke buddy. People teased me for no reason. Classmates would hide my backpack or swap out my lunch. I was the good sport, the one who'd laugh, even when it stung, just to stay included. I thought I had outgrown that. I thought I had surrounded myself with people who respected me, people who had evolved past that kind of high school garbage. But in that moment, all of those emotions came flooding back, as if I didn't matter, and I hated that feeling. I understand it wasn't dangerous. I know they didn't mean any actual damage. However, trauma does not care about intentions, I thought as I packed my things. In that quiet Airbnb bedroom, something clicked. I couldn't move forward until I knew, without doubt, that my voice, my pain, my boundaries would be taken seriously. When we got back from the trip, I called my fiancé. "James, there is something important I need to talk about. Can we meet?" I said. He immediately agreed. I could tell by his tone that he knew I wasn't going to pretend everything was okay. The next week, I sat my fiancé down and had a serious talk. I needed to know if this was just a lapse in judgment or a reflection of how he saw me. If he thought I was the kind of person who could be laughed at and then expected to move on with a smile. To his credit, he listened. Really listened. There was something in his face. Guilt, maybe even fear. He said he'd gotten carried away, that he thought I was tougher, that he didn't realize how scared I was. He admitted it was stupid, and that if the roles had been reversed, he would have been furious too. My bridesmaids also contacted me individually. Some were sheepish, some were defensive. A few even cried. Some people admitted it wasn't really a nice idea, while some bridesmaids did not make the final cut. One of them, Tasha, wrote me a handwritten letter apologizing. She said she got swept up in the group dynamic, but looking back, she saw how wrong it was. She said I didn't deserve to feel small. That hit me deeply. I ended up postponing the wedding for a few months, not because I didn't love him, and not because I refused to marry him. I did. I still do. But something had snapped, and I couldn't ignore it. I just needed time. Time to reflect on a few things. Whether this was an isolated incident or a sign of a deeper problem. Because if the people closest to me could reject my fear, discomfort, and voice as a joke, what does that say about the foundation we were building? It wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about protecting myself. My therapist called it emotional reevaluation. I called it survival. For weeks, I kept thinking about what it meant to stand at an altar and say, "I do," while part of me still carried that ache. That moment where I felt like a forgotten punchline. Before I said those words, I needed to be sure, truly sure, that my emotions would be heard, my boundaries respected, that the person I was marrying saw me as more than someone to laugh with, that he'd never again laugh at me when I was in pain. This decision wasn't easy. Some people, including my parents, thought I was being dramatic. My mother even asked, "Are you really going to throw away a whole wedding over a prank?" Others tiptoed around me, avoiding the subject. I could see it in their eyes. They didn't get it. They didn't understand the weight of being abandoned and watched, of having your trust crushed in real time, then being told to get over it. But deep down, I just knew this wasn't just a prank. Why would someone want to ruin your special day like that? Who gave them the right to use me as a laughingstock? It was about self-respect, about emotional safety, about drawing a line in the sand and saying, "No, not me, not anymore." In the following weeks, I poured myself into journaling, into therapy, into long walks that helped me hear myself again. I remembered who I was before all the wedding noise. I remembered being the little girl who used to write letters to her future self, who once dreamed of marrying someone who would protect her heart like a treasure. And I asked myself, what would that girl think of all this? She'd be heartbroken, but she'd also be proud. Proud that I wasn't brushing it under the rug. Proud that I didn't let peer pressure or bridal deadlines dictate how I deserved to be treated. There's a quiet strength in pausing when the world expects you to rush, a dignity in saying, "I need time to feel okay again." And I embrace that. If something doesn't seem right, or if it stings even slightly, you don't have to laugh it off simply to make other people feel better. You don't have to reduce your emotions to meet someone else's sense of comedy. You don't have to remain silent to maintain the peace. I used to think that speaking up made me high maintenance, that having emotional boundaries made me too sensitive, but now I know better. Now I know that boundaries are a form of love, self-love, and sometimes even love for others. Because when we let people know what hurts, we give them a chance to grow too. Every relationship, whether romantic or not, requires a choice between maintaining harmony and preserving oneself. And the reality is, those who truly love you, really, truly love you, will never ask you to choose. People learn how to treat you based on what you accept. Biting your tongue or forcing a grin while uncomfortable might unintentionally teach others that it's okay. But every time you speak out, even if your voice shakes, you remind them and yourself that you matter. You are the guardian of your peace. You choose who gets access to your emotional space. You decide what type of humor is appropriate and what is not. That is not selfish. That is survival. And survival is powerful. If I look at the bright side, this incident is also the narrative of how I gained strength and clarity. The strength to eventually declare, "This is not acceptable." The clarity to look into the eyes of people I loved and say, "I deserve better." I discovered that even the people closest to you who say they love you may cross borders they shouldn't. And it's not your job to silently forgive them before they realize what they've done. It's not your job to carry the weight of their jokes just to keep things light. If you've ever felt like the punchline, like everyone's laughing at you while you're just trying to keep the peace, I want you to remember this. You're not the joke. You're the main character. After that weekend, I had some very real conversations. Not yelling, not drama, but honest eye-to-eye truth. Not everyone took it well, but I did what I needed to do, and I was at peace with my decisions. James and I continued seeing a couples counselor. We pushed through some uncomfortable sessions, but it helped. He listened. He grew. And slowly, I began to trust again. Not just him, but myself, my intuition, my worth. I realized that this experience didn't ruin me. It refined me. It taught me how to stand tall, how to choose myself without apology. Also, next time someone suggests a surprise bachelorette weekend, maybe ask a few more questions. Know your worth, tell your story, and never be afraid to walk away from what doesn't serve you. You deserve to be the hero of your own life, not the comic relief, not the background character, not the silent sufferer. You. Have you ever felt betrayed or laughed at by the people you love? If this story resonates with you, hit the like button and leave your story in the comment section. And of course, subscribe to my channel for more real, raw, and ridiculous stories. Till then, stay safe and happy.